gap. Don't try to explain away the gap. It's not as nice as meeting in real life. I mean, if we were at South by Southwest right now and all in a circle, it'd be more satisfying than this. So don't try to pretend it's not going to be. But what we can do is celebrate what the digital brings, because we don't need to travel anymore to do this kind of event and get the kind of presence that you do get in a real world event, right? The ability to see, to feel like you're in a fire circle in this case with other people. But yeah, it's there's a variety of tools out there to let us go from on one side of the spectrum, virtual reality, where you can be in a system like Rec Room or Glue, or there's a whole bunch of them that let you actually touch somebody else virtually, share a digital item. So if I'm designing a car, for instance, that could be in the middle of the room and we're walking around a CAD model of a car. Or if I'm a scientist, there's a system called Nanome where I was walking around one of the viruses a couple of weeks ago with some scientists, and we were actually putting our head in the virus and manipulating it and thinking about new drug treatments, understanding them, how it all works. There's a variety of tools for us to work together on 3D things, and that's really exciting. Second Life has been around for a long time. I used it at Microsoft. We had an island back in 2004, right? And this lets us get together and have a chat room where we can just use our voice back and forth. But I don't know how I could add some value here, and I'll let some other people talk.
Well,
that was great.
Say something. I mean, you're saying going to South by Southwest would be better. It's not true for everybody. For some people, that would definitely be a lot worse. So it's not one size fits all for whether physical space or virtual better.
And that's worth unpacking a little bit, because some people physically can't move around very well, right?
Yeah.
Some people can't afford. It costs a lot of money to go to South by Southwest. A few $100s just to fly there, and then the tickets are $1,000, and then night, right?
Yep. So it's cost, and for some people also extremely uncomfortable, or logistically impossible. And there's certain things you can't do in physical space, and there's a lot of things you can do in virtual space, like you just brought up some examples of just tossing a car on the ground, looking at it together, or sort of certain types of experiential interactive things that you can do in virtual space is prohibitively expensive or dangerous or what have you in physical space. So
yeah,
it's not, but I agree with you that don't try and put an equal sign between them. Take advantage of the benefits and the strengths of the virtual environments, and don't necessarily just try and replicate exactly what we do in physical space and virtual space, because it's some things that physical space is better for it's better to do there. But there's a lot of things that you're way better off doing in virtual space, or makes it possible to do. And focus almost on how you can take advantage of the differences.
So since
the same.
Since we're talking about space, would someone describe the space we're in? What's the fire circle? What's the art? What's the story behind this place? And how much has it changed since maybe in the last years? Yeah, I have to admit, I haven't been to Second Life in many years.
Sure. I'll handle that one. So it's kind of mind-bending to wrap your head around what it is we're actually sitting in. So back 15 years ago, I first heard about Second Life and had this moment where I realized that I was going to spend the rest of my life working on it, because it was such a disruptive idea. And I spent some time there as the evangelist before anyone had heard of this idea of a world that would be created entirely by its users. And what I thought was so powerful about it was that it was this idea of a future in which we worked in something that felt like a video game that had the open authoring principles of the internet. Now, what we're sitting in here is the fire pit, a region called Billions of Us, and this came together just over the last 4 or 5 weeks. It's exactly actually a month. A month ago, we had a call from a friend of mine who was holding a conference. She's a woman who started TEDx named Lara Stein, and she then ran the Community for Singularity University, and now has a company called BOMA Global. And she said, we throw these conferences around the world for people who are innovators and thinking about a sustainable future, and we now can't hold conferences, and we've put together a live worldwide video event in partnership with Zoom and Facebook Live to talk about COVID-19. And it's going to be great, and tens of thousands of people are going to watch it. And we have experts, we have everything that a conference demands, but we don't have a place for people to be together, which is, as you guys know, it's so much of what makes a conference special. It's so much of what, as Robert was saying, makes events and working together special, is feeling shared space, because there's a trust that develops when you're in a construct, in a 3D spatial environment that's just irreplaceable. And she said, "Can you help me?" So I said, "Yes." And I hung up the phone and I called, it was a weekend, I called Ebbe and I said, "Ebbe, I need your help. We have a catastrophe." And Ebbe's so cool. He said, "I'll give you 4 islands." And he didn't even charge me because we didn't even have a business. And he called Patch, who's in charge of content, and they gave us a big amphitheater. And in real time, this conference was going around the real world with speakers starting in New Zealand, then to France, then to Brazil, then to the East Coast, and finally in the West Coast. And we started funneling people from the live Facebook. The Zoom was going to Facebook Live, and we put links so that they could come into Second Life, and it worked. And at that point, we had this epiphany that this is what people need right now, is we need a place where we can be intimate with each other and where we can work on the most pressing problems. And so everything you see around you is stuff that's been built in the last 4 weeks. We've created a place where people can work. And this fire pit where we're sitting is, we begin every day. Our team who are sitting around here, they're all over the world. Will got trapped in Hawaii. We don't feel sorry for him.
No.
Sasha Mumani is in Texas. Pathfinder's in Montreal. I'm in Princeton. You're in France. Scoble's in Silicon Valley. Ebbe's in Mill Valley in California. But we begin every day with the Zoom call, and that's where we talk business. And it's very linear and synchronous, and we have to manage it very tightly because it doesn't feel the same way. And we end every day, we have this fire pit where the whole team meets, and we always have a special guest come by. Scoble was here last week, had Ebbe as a guest. We've had wonderful guests every night. And sorry for the long ramble, but it feels, it has that attribute of real life where we have real relationships. And it's been a vast accelerant to the work we have to do. We've been working 18 hours a day building this, and we're all sort of on the team experiencing this feeling of time warp where it just feels like we know each other so much better because we've shared this space with each other.
And I want to jump in and talk about what you actually see here around the pit right now. You see a lot of art. A big part of what I focus on in this environment is thinking of ways to sort of unlock the creativity in people's minds and also celebrate how people are using these different mediums for creative expression. So you have virtual art here, sort of looks like found object art. You have interactive 3D art that's based on 2D pastel drawings. You have sculptures made by different artists who are not only creating virtual art but also creating physical art. There's some around the space here. There are some like 3D models that some artists have created, like real world bronze lost wax process sculptures of our minds. I always come back very much to our minds are designed to want to be with people, and tools like Zoom are great at keeping us connected, but we don't feel like we're with each other because there's not a place. And once you create a unique place that's engaging and creative, it starts to unlock all of these wonderful parts of your mind that allow you to creatively solve problems. So if you think about the business value of that, it's helping people solve problems that they have never been able to solve before.
Yeah, I think that distinction is important. I mean, Zoom, we do at Linden Lab, we obviously use Second Life a lot for very all hands for 150 people all the way to group meetings and team meetings, staff meetings. But we also use Hangout and Zoom for other use cases. And I feel that the video feels more transactional, very much trying to, solve a particular problem or a process. Whereas what you alluded to there, Pathfinder, is sort of the more serendipitous kind of just ideation and collaborative thinking, and it's much easier to do in this type of an environment. This environment to me is much less stressful. Watching 8, 10, 12 faces all staring at me, it can be kind of exhausting over time. Much more chill to sit in front of the fire, and makes people relax. You also have people have interesting ways of playing with identity and style, and that always creates for good conversation, and you start to see some interesting individuality come through. So it's and if you want to do something together, like wander around, so we see a lot of conferences, and it's just conferences, but like experiential things, like museums and things. I wouldn't go to a museum in Zoom, but Second Life or virtual is much. So there's a whole range of tools that are either very specific for a particular task, and then you have sort of more generic things. And Second Life is quite broad. I mean, it's a platform that creates all kinds of things. Everything I've seen in the physical world, I've similar things done in Second Life.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, your microphone might be a little low, and apparently people in the other world we are broadcasting this world into cannot hear us. Actually, this is quite fascinating because, this year theme for Burning Man is multiverse, and right now we're sitting in Second Life, and this conversation is broadcasted in Laval in France in a virtual world in Virbela, where actually people are connected from all around the world. Earlier in our presentation, there were people from South Africa, from Colorado, from different places all around the world, and we are broadcasted on YouTube, and so there is a depth and a story behind that, and I'm not sure how to grasp it, but what do we do with all these worlds? Actually, we can be in several worlds at the same time. Is that ubiquity? Maybe is the question. Is that what we are going to? Who wants to grab the bait on that?
Well, I
And
think
excuse
it's
my French.
No. I love your French. I wish I could answer in French. I think you're asking one of the most interesting questions in the world right now.
Oh, thank you.
So when uh, we all heard that Burning Man was going to be held in the multiverse, um, it made us so curious because, and I think we made the wrong assumption out of the gate. We said uh, that must mean they've chosen a platform, right? And then we sat around this fire pit and in long conference calls, and we talked with Ebbe, and we said, maybe a Second Life, and where would it be? Maybe it would be in Fortnite, or maybe running on the Unreal Engine, or maybe it'll be in alt space. And at a certain point in the conversation, suddenly we stopped, and someone said, "Wait, what is the multiverse?" And we went and and I would encourage everyone to do this because it's really interesting. So there's the metaverse, which is an old concept but comes from Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. And the metaverse is an interconnected series of digital spaces where you're represented in 3D as an avatar. The multiverse is something even bigger than that. And so I think while I don't have any proprietary information, what it seems to me is the multiverse is the superset of all the metaverses. And I think if I were to guess what Burning Man is uh, what their vision is going to be, is that Burning Man will sort of take place all over the real world and all over many virtual worlds. Um, which begs the question, what will the metaverse, as as environments like the one we're within right now, proliferate over the years to come? You have to asking a lot. Um, what does COVID mean? And she said, we throw these conferences around the world for people who are innovators and thinking about a sustainable future, and we now can't hold conferences, and we've put together a live worldwide video event in partnership with Zoom and Facebook Live to talk about COVID-19. And it's going to be great, and tens of thousands of people are going to watch it. And we have experts, we have everything that a conference demands, but we don't have a place for people to be together, which is, as you guys know, it's will we all go back to life as we were before, and remember those weird times when there was a pandemic and we all had to meet by the fire pit? We tend to think that that's not going to happen, that there's been some sort of permanent shift. I think as a cultural bellwether and beacon, I'm just very excited about. I've never been to Burning Man. I'm very excited about this year's Burning Man, and I hope that the vision of what the multiverse is in their conception and in the community's embrace of it is one that's as open and inclusive as possible. I think that would be the biggest vision. I can imagine people doing Zoom parties from their lawns dressed in their Burning Man garb. I can imagine, huge playas in Second Life. I can imagine broadcasting those out to Verbella. I can imagine special conferences like Burning Man camps often have thought leaderships. I have a friend who spoke at his Burning Man camp about the future of law 3 years ago. So you can see how these various environments, both real world and virtual world, will all sort of intermingle, and it's just so cool.
Yeah,
Well,
the chances of there being sort of one that rules them all is I don't think will happen for if ever. So there will be plenty, each focusing on various different strengths, and so yeah, I think having many platforms that each service, slightly different use cases, I think is how. I mean, how many messaging apps are you using? I have
oh,
like,
well, one too many.
but they're for
One
different
too.
use cases, for different audiences, for different groups. For so you have Discord for one thing and Slack for another thing, and you know
WhatsApp,
Facebook
WeChat.
Messenger for another. Yeah, WhatsApp for me means golf because that's where I talk to my golf buddy. So it's like I have one app per sort of group that I'm talking to, and it'll
So I
probably
mean,
be
an
the same in
interesting
virtual
an
too.
interesting way to think about it is like, um, if this was the early days of the internet, right? You could have asked the question early on, who owns the internet? And we saw instantiations where, AOL, or in French term, in France you had Minitel early. Then
Yep.
we had AOL, or Pointcast, where people packaged internet services as a singular solution. But I think if you extend that parallel to the metaverse, what we're going to find is that diversity wins, and openness wins. I hope.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's hope for that. Exactly. But it's actually interesting what I was listening to what you were saying just earlier, and I was like, okay, so if we are in several parallel universe at the same time, is that Star Trek? Are there different species? Is it Star Trek yet? And are we Klingons, or what is the language?
I
And,
think
and,
part of
and
it is
how do we communicate from one world to the other?
there's the
That's
technical
one.
challenge. There's the technical challenge of that, but also the beauty of having multiple platforms is the ability for cultures that have different needs to embrace the right tools, right? So you have environments, for example, we're using voice. There are people who are just much more comfortable in text chat, and so you have different communities and subcultures in the same platforms, and different cultures that migrate to different platforms to leverage different affordances. I think one of the three questions we have for the panel, how do we create new cultures and shared virtual spaces that delight the senses and foster creativity? I think it's about having malleable platforms, and over time building the connections between those platforms that allow your identity in some form to remain the same or be different on the different platforms. So I think The strength is in having something like, for example, like the Laval Virtual Conference is happening in an environment that is very focused on, allowing people to go to different talks, and it's the right tool for the right job. And the kind of conversation we're having here is a little bit different, and there's more creative affordances here. And one other thing that's fascinating to me is this idea of spontaneity, right? We're so sheltered from surprise in a lot of these tools that we use every day, and an environment, like what we have in this particular case, is where you have an opportunity for all kinds of spontaneity, because it's very malleable. But you may not need that all the time. You maybe don't want to be surprised when you're trying to give a presentation in front of 1,000 people.
One
Yeah, I
thing we
think
haven't talked about is the affordance for building that exists in Second Life and many, many new places, Minecraft and whatnot. Moo, you built this world, and it's quite amazing. What's going on that side of this tool? Why is building such an important part of virtual world's experience?
What a great question.
Well, so, um, years ago, everything had to be hand built with prims, and now it's more like a Unity sort of thing where it's a 3D repository where some very talented builders have already made very quality homes and offices that you can use, and there's landscaping, there's furniture that already exists, and it allows you to rapidly iterate. You can still make custom things, but there's already things that exist that you can use to build and evoke these emotions. So, the playa, I wanted it to be reminiscent of Burning Man, and the mountain area, I wanted it to be a mountain retreat. Because everyone likes relaxing at like Big Bear, whatever. And then, the farm area where it's just really relaxing and serene.
And I think Robert, to your point, um, I think again we can sort of uh, we can draw parallels to two things that we've been talking about. We can talk about um, uh, the the internet, and we can talk about Burning Man. And what they both share in common is the uh, the incredible importance of user-created content. When the internet was a read-only um, medium for the most part, it was so much less compelling than when it evolved in Web 2.0 to become a read-write environment and user-created content and YouTube, and it unlocked this basic primal human desire to express yourself through your creations. And I think that's a similar thing we see in Burning Man, right? Where a huge percentage of the um, of the creative
The art.
catharsis is the art. Burning
Yeah.
Man without the art is not Burning Man. To go to the desert and see, or to go to the desert and just see art created by, the world's best artists, but they're only selected by Burning Man. No, it's the diversity. It's the fact that anyone who buys a ticket brings art. They're part of the art.
Where I
Um,
was where I was going with this, Ruben, is that Moo is a new kind of rock star. I
yep,
believe 10 years from now, I believe that people who can create these experiences and create a new human experience are going to be not just rock stars, but are going to have sizable businesses.
yep.
And this ability to create virtual worlds is going to create many jobs, which is to the topic of this panel, I believe.
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, I mean, there's virtual. I mean, so Second Life, for those who don't know, it has a virtual economy, and there's a marketplace, and people
looks like found object art. You have interactive 3D art that's based on 2D pastel drawings. You have sculptures made by different artists who are not only creating virtual art but also creating physical art. There's some around the space here. There are some like 3D models that some artists have created, like real world bronze lost wax process sculptures of our minds. I always come back very much to our minds are designed to want to be with people, and tools like Zoom are great at keeping us connected, but we don't feel like we're with each other because there's not a place. And once you create a unique place that's engaging and creative, it starts to unlock all of these wonderful parts of your mind that allow you to creatively solve problems. So if you think about the business value of that, it's helping people solve problems that they have never been able to solve before.
Yeah, I think that distinction is important. I mean, Zoom, we do at Linden Lab, we obviously use Second Life a lot for very all hands for 150 people, all the way to group meetings and team meetings, staff meetings. But we also use Hangout and Zoom for other use cases. And I feel that the video feels more transactional, very much trying to solve a particular problem or a process. Whereas what you alluded to there, Pathfinder, is sort of the more serendipitous kind of just ideation and collaborative thinking, and it's much easier to do in this type of an environment. This environment is, to me, is much less stressful. Watching 8, 10, 12 faces all staring at me, it can be kind of exhausting over time. Much more chill to sit in front of the fire, and makes people relax. You also have people have interesting ways of playing with identity and style, and that always creates for good conversation, and you start to see some interesting individuality come through. So it's and if you want to do something together, like wander around, so we see a lot of conferences, and it's just conferences, but like experiential things like museums and things. I wouldn't go to a museum in Zoom, but Second Life or virtual is much. So there's a whole range of tools that are either very specific for a particular task, and then you have sort of more generic things. And Second Life is quite broad. I mean, it's a platform that creates all kinds of things. Everything I've seen in the physical world, I've similar things done in Second Life.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, your microphone might be a little low, and apparently people in the other world we are broadcasting this world into cannot hear us. Actually, this is quite fascinating because, well, this year theme for Burning Man is multiverse, and right now we're sitting in Second Life, and this conversation is broadcasted in Laval in France in a virtual world in Virbela, where actually people are connected from all around the world. Earlier in our presentation, there were people from South Africa, from Colorado, from different places all around the world, and we are broadcasted. We are broadcasted on YouTube, and so there is a depth and a story behind that, and I'm not sure how to grasp it. But what do we do with all these worlds? Actually, we can be in several worlds at the same time. Is that ubiquity? Maybe is the question. Is that what we are going to? Who wants to grab the bait on that?
Well, I think
excuse my French.
No. I love your French. I wish I could answer in French. I think you're asking one of the most interesting questions in the world right now.
Oh, thank you.
So when we all heard that Burning Man was going to be held in the multiverse, it made us so curious because, and I think we made the wrong assumption out of the gate. We said that must mean they've chosen a platform, right? And then we sat around this fire pit and in long conference calls, and we talked with Ebbe, and we said, you know, maybe a Second Life, and where would it be? Maybe it would be in Fortnite, or maybe, you know, running on the Unreal Engine, or maybe it'll be in alt space. And at a certain point in the conversation, suddenly we stopped, and someone said, "Wait, what is the multiverse?" And we went and and I would encourage everyone to do this because it's really interesting. So there's the metaverse, which is an old concept but comes from Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. And the metaverse is an interconnected series of digital spaces where you're represented in 3D as an avatar. The multiverse is something even bigger than that. And so I think while I don't have any proprietary information, what it seems to me is the multiverse is the superset of all the metaverses. And I think what going to what their vision community's embrace of it is one that's as open and inclusive as possible. That would be the biggest vision. Where, you know, I can imagine people doing
And last year, users created stuff, cashed out over $60 billion in earnings. So it's real jobs for a lot of people. There's a lot of people in Second Life making more money than each of us do in our day jobs. So there is, and if you want specific content, you go to specific creators, like you just do in the physical world. If you want good trees, you go to the tree guy. You know. So people get
Interesting.
specialized into very specific things. If you want great, you know, avatar, there are all kinds of parts, people specializing in things like hands and hair and eyes and all kinds of details, and create businesses around it. And that's kind of how we enabled Second Life to take off, was to sort of create this economy and enable people to create and trade. But that also creates complexity, you know. For some things, getting lots of people into a meeting or do something, you might want a more special purposed application for those. But it also creates what you guys are talking about, this incredible diversity, where people going to school here, you have people getting treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder, you have art, you have music, you have all the things that humans do in life, you know. In that sense, it's more of a world than an application.
Well, that's all. This is super interesting. Actually, realizing the depths of well, obviously of Second Life, but all these worlds. I was thinking about what you were saying about creating job and creating economies. And I know you well. Obviously, Second Life has been around for many years. And in the panel just before this one, there was that guy talking about a virtual reality world based on with a exchange system based on blockchain. So I guess my question is where I'm going to is that more complexity? Would that help foster adoption, or is there a risk of being rejected because of too much complexity?
Yeah,
Not sure I'm
I
making
feel. I
myself
mean,
clear. Sorry.
for Second Life, I feel that. I mean, I think the flexibility, the more flexibility you have in a platform or a system, the more complexity you create. It's kind of like you add more features and more possibilities, you add complexity, and there's just really no way to escape that. And so I think it's the strength of Second Life is the diversity and all the huge variety of use cases that are happening every day in Second Life. But it's also kind of there's a bit of the difficulty. Like, how do you tell someone what Second Life is and for whom it is what? Because it's kind of a bit of everything to everybody. That makes it more difficult to get someone to understand what it is. And I liken it a little bit to dropping someone off in a foreign country. It's like dropping them off at the airport and say, good luck. What do you want to do? I don't know what you want to do. You go figure it out, as opposed to the platform or the application or the tool telling you very explicitly what it's about and what you're. And so that kind of generic purpose it makes it more difficult to have people understand what it is and what it's for. Because you might go to a city, and if you go to the wrong neighborhood, you're going to have a very bad impression of that city. You go to a different neighborhood, and it's going to be a fantastic city. So depending on what your first experience is and what you see, people quickly draw conclusions for, therefore it means it's this. Well, actually, if you had just gone around the corner or if you had just gone over there, you would have had a totally different experience. That's hard to sort of get people to odd
It's
a Second Life.
it's something where it's sort of part of our mission is we're trying very hard. What we're surrounded with, these lands that Moo and her team have been creating are what we call the town, which is the first phase of what we're trying to do here in this era where we think people are going to have to work in this different and hopefully better, but different way, certainly different. And what we're creating is a community of offices and not conventional offices, but fanciful and possibility-rich spaces in a community. And what we're grappling with, and I think Moo's doing an amazing job, and the team is certainly amazing, is where we're trying to simplify that possibility space so that for someone who, let's say, runs a design company or a technology company or a PR firm, or we have a broad array in the first 40. The pioneers is what we call them, who we're trying to simplify it so that they can come in and not be forced. It's sort of like they're dying of thirst. You don't want to hand them the fire hose. You want to hand them a glass of water, and it turns out you can do it. You can make it quite simple, and there's always the fire hose for later.
I'm actually watching the other screen, and the audience in Virbela in Laval Virtual is actually visiting the whole space. And then thank you, I think it's Eric for doing that. So we're just about to wrap up before Laval Virtual gets to the next session. And well, you were talking about Moo and her incredible job, and I cannot not brag about the incredible outfits she made for me.
You're on fire. Fire.
It actually looks like my Burning Man outfit, and my kids complain I was missing the sunglasses, and she did all that with grace, and thank you very much. This is so much
It
fun.
was my pleasure.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see what's next here. Anybody wants to give a conclusion, or maybe each of you wants to wrap up on something, and we can take away from this panel back to Laval, back to the rest of the world.
Well, I think the thing I like to always focus on again is how, we're talking a lot about technology here, and the key thing is, how does it speak to us as human beings? How does it speak to our minds, the way our minds naturally interact with the world? And I think it's wonderful that we're talking about a lot of tech, but at the heart of it all, I think the more that we focus on how do we speak to the human parts of us? How do we unlock creativity in human ways? And we leverage these environments to do that. And the way what works really amazingly is if you get really interesting people, good people, you make them feel like they're together in a place, that they're with each other, and then you create a creative environment where you are not sheltered from surprise, where spontaneity is something that happens, and a lot of self-expression where you can express yourself not just by your avatar's identity, but by the malleable space that you're in. I think the future is just amazing. Any of these platforms, be they 2D environments that we're in like right now that are 2D on a screen, but 3D in nature, and then all the way up to fully perceptually immersive VR based systems. Speaking to the humanity is where the future is at.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. It's not about technology. The more it's technology, I think it's discussed, the more it gets in the way. So what I'm doing next is I'm going to go to the University of Oregon here in Second Life and meet with those people, and then after that I'm going to go to a book club.
That's so awesome.
That's how I like to think about it, as opposed to VR, AR acronym, blah 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 blah. It's what do we want to do? What do we want to be? How do we do it with other people? Is what it's all about.
Well, that's a very nice way to put things in perspective. Well, thank you again, all of you, for joining. Well, I know it's early morning for you in the US at the Fire Circle. Thank you, Reuben and John, for being so reactive. You were talking about how you built billions of us over a weekend. We literally built this in less than 24 hours, being in multiverses with Laval Virtual. And thank you to Laval Virtual for letting us do this little experiment. I don't know how I am going to end the other call on to all of you around this. It was a really interesting experiment, and I shall see you soon at the Fire Circle.
We'll
Cheers,
see you at the
everybody.
Fire Circle.
Bella.
Awesome.
Have a great day. Stay
Thank
safe. Stay virtual.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Au revoir.